Hi everyone, this is Kelsey and I'm the Vice Chief of Editing of the World Update. We're the branch of the GNS Inc. that are going to be responsible for presenting you with encouraging and uplifting news and updates that are happening within the local, regional, and global things that are going on. We feel there's enough bad news being broadcast in our lives, so why not hear something good? Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at _the_U_. Let's update and uplift.
This is Max from Sacramento, and you are listening to Decal with the E.I.T.H.R podcast.
So, let's start with the E.I.T.H.R.
You're listening to the E.I.T.H.R podcast with Decal.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Decal here hosting the E.I.T.H.R podcast. We are episode number 66 from the GNS HQ here in Northern California. Getting ready for some rain as usual this week, but hey, we need it. We're in a drought. So, got some things we want to talk about, but before we do, I want to welcome everybody who's listening to the E.I.T.H.R podcast, wherever you happen to be tuning into, from Spotify to E.I.T.H.R to Google Podcast to Spreaker app. You're more than welcome to follow us on the social media of Twitter and Instagram. The handle is going to be the same, TheEITHR. If you also have YouTube, you're more than welcome to subscribe to the channel of the parent station, the GNS Inc. TheGNSINC. E.I.T.H.R stands for the elephant in the room. We kind of talk about topics and issues that are very difficult for people to discuss within their circle because of bias, stances, or one-sided perspectives. And we try to do this from a non-biased perspective of our own, but at least to give light to all the different angles. So instead of having an ignorant, hopefully you'll have more of an informed opinion about certain things. I do have my position on certain things, but I also try not to be one-sided myself. So I literally try to walk my own talk. So we're going to talk about a few things here that actually took place within the last 24 hours, 48, in discussions with people that I know. And if you saw that in the description of this episode for today's podcast, a lot of it's going to be, what do you think? Just like every other episode, what do you think? But what we're going to do here, as normal, we're going to give some inspirational, motivational. But before we do that, we're going to give a shout out. And I want to give a shout out to the Dallas Cowboys. Here's why I want to give a shout out to the Dallas, the football team out there in Dallas, Texas. They knocked out punk ass Tom Brady. Now, this next game is against the 49ers. I wish both teams the best of luck, and I hope it ends in a tie. And you have to play until somebody wins. And I hope that never happen. I hope that you both ended a tie, and it throws the NFL for a loop about who should advance, because both teams are garbage. And if you don't like what I have to say about either one of those teams,
I ain't scared of you motherfuckers.
You know where to find me. So, inspirational, motivational. We're going to get right into this. Listen, ladies and gentlemen. Don't nothing grow under your feet but grass. And the only thing that comes to a sleeper is a dream. If you want something to happen, you got to get off your ass and make it happen. And I understand that there's going to be situations where it seems as if it's impossible, and it's very frustrating, and it's very grueling, and it's very tiring, and in some cases it may even be discouraging. But understand something. If you want what others do not have, you have to be able to do what others aren't willing to do. Trust me, the first step is the first step. Once you get past that, then it's just a bunch of momentum that's going to take its place. So that's pretty much what I want to do there. Anybody who's thinking about going to the gym, that school project, that diet, that little last bit of effort for your job so that way tomorrow's work is that much of a lighter load, put in that extra work. Just put in that extra work. You don't necessarily put in this extra work for the person who's receiving it, but you honestly could just be putting in that extra work just for your own self and your own peace of mind. One last thing. I was watching this Silence of the Lamb movie, and a commercial came on about what's called brown noise. And brown noise, well, according to this ad, is kind of similar to white noise, but it's specifically designed, its frequency is designed to help your brain stop all the racing thoughts that it may have. So if your brain's kind of like mine, where this thing is just traveling 1,000,000 miles a second, and your focus goes to multiple things. I guess you can say it's kind of a case of ADD. Brown noise. And I know they have it on the Calm app, but you might be able to use a cheat code and find it on YouTube and just listen to it. And what I do when it comes to sleeping, especially for those of us who have a hard time sleeping at night, is I turn the volume low enough to where I have to focus and concentrate to hear the noise. But it's just enough for that. So we're going to get right into this topic right after a word from our sponsor. This is D.Cal with the E.I.T.H.R podcast. Be right back.
Most t-shirts are simply cool to look at and or look in. Well, so are ours. But ours also aim to send a message. They aim to put a name on obstacles that once stood in your way and aren't there anymore. Struggles that you turned into successes and crushed. You made it look easy. Shop at mile.today. Mile.today. www.mile.today. A GNS collection.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the E.I.T.H.R podcast. So, one of the things we're going to talk about is the perception of your words when you speak. I had a conversation with a good friend, and it was over social media conversation where she made a comment, and immediately she received some negative feedback from people, negative comments from people, negative conversation from people. And she put a post on, or she sent a tweet in response to that, and I happened to see it. So I read the tweet and I responded to her, and I kind of let her know, I was like, listen, I know you are not what people are saying that you are, but you have to understand the world that other people live in may not necessarily match the world that you come from. Now, to be fair, we are in a generation where every fucking thing you say happens to be offensive. Everything that comes out of your mouth or anything that you send to social media, there's somebody who's just sitting there being offended off anything is almost as if what they're doing is they're looking for things that offend them and to attack that. We happen to live in that world. Now, there's a fine line between having thicker skin and being very cautious of what you say, having a little bit of empathy of what you say. And so I explained to her, and this woman's a sharp woman. She's not an idiot by any means. It's just one of those scenarios where she said what she said, and if you know who she is, you would agree. But I also had to put in perspective, when you're on social media and you're put words on a screen, majority of the time, ladies and gentlemen, the only voice that a person has is the voice between their ears, is the voice in their head. So they're going to read it based on the mood or based on the tone they are assuming you meant. Secondarily, they're going to read it in a tone based on a mood that they happen to be in. Is that fair? No. Is that reality? Yes. So you can put something that's completely innocent and tongue-in-cheek, but if they don't know who you are, if they don't know you well enough to know your personality, and in the course of that conversation, a consistent tone isn't established, there's a high chance they're going to go worst case scenario on what it is you were intending to say. And it can get dangerous. So I had to let her know. I was like, listen, again, I don't believe that you are what people are claiming you to be. But you have to understand there are certain things that you say to certain people. Culturally, they have a negative relationship to it. It just happens. And so, again, it's one of those things where people are being so sensitive. I said, well, to a degree, you are absolutely right. But there are just key words. There are just hot buttons, you say, that's just going to trigger people. I told her, I said, listen, I have female friends who I can call a bitch, and they will think nothing of it. It doesn't bother them. It doesn't affect them. It doesn't offend them. They'll keep the conversation going. I have known female friends where you can call them bitch in more, let's just say, intimate settings, right? And then I have female friends who, if you call them anything other than the name that they were given at their birth, you're going to have to fight for your life. You have to be able to read the room. You have to know your audience. Every comedian goes on stage and they'll tell a few jokes to kind of see how the room is. And with that said, they'll understand where they can take this room. Now, it's going to take years of practice and years of stand-up comedy and years of experiencing to realize that. In addition, the circle you affiliate with may not be the same as the circle that I affiliate with, which is completely different than the circle that's over here across from you, which is different than the circle that's right next to you, which is different than the circle that's above or below you. One person, one group does not represent a gamut of people. But I think what happens is we tend to believe that. We tend to believe that. So you have to be cautious and careful about what it is that you say. Even jokes. I have made some jokes that have caused people to get extremely upset. But if they know me, they understand that's just Decal being Decal. He's being an asshole. He doesn't mean anything by it. He doesn't even believe in this. He's just saying it because he knows it's going to trigger us in a funny way. But I've had relationships end because of things like that. I've had friendships lost because of things like that. where I'll make a comment and next thing I know, I'm getting blocked on social media. And I'm going to the person like, damn, did you really think I was serious about that? Like, you honestly thought that's what I meant? But because of the temperature of the conversations they've been having with previous people, my comment was the straw that just happened to break the back of that camel. What I said happened to be something that was just, okay, that was enough. That's the last one. I can't take anymore. In most cases, most circumstances, it wouldn't have bothered anybody. But depending on the mood that they were in when that happens and it came across the screen, you don't know how it's going to be. So, yes, again, we need to have thicker skin. We need to be a little bit less offended and more open to the, okay, so what do you mean by that? Because by doing this, you also know who is who. When someone says something, you can have a better understanding. Okay, this motherfucker is just being rude. Okay, this person they're just a little insensitive with their words. So I kind of got to get out of them what exactly it is that they're talking about. Other people can sit back and say, oh my God, he's such a prick. I love him. He's such a prick. Because let's face it, if you like somebody, they get a longer leash on what they say. If you don't know somebody or don't like anybody, well, they have a shorter leash and they have less room to maneuver. And that's just life. Right? That's just how it works. What do you guys think? Do you believe this is also the truth? That we need to be a little bit more sensitive? Do we need to be a little less sensitive? Do we need to be a little more considerate? Do we need to read the room? Does the room just need to get the fuck up and do something else? What is it? What is your take? You can reach us, like I said, on Twitter at the E.I.T.H.R. Let me know. DeCal, this is what we feel about today's podcast is I think people do need to be a little more considerate about what they say. I do think people need to be a little bit thicker skinned about what they hear. I do think people need to communicate a little bit more. What's your opinion? Now, the next topic I want to talk about is what's the proper age for sexualization? So I was having a conversation with a relative, and she was extremely upset and was letting me know that she had a conversation with a friend of hers, and this conversation didn't really end too well. Where in bathrooms at elementary schools, they're now making them gender neutral. So there is no more boys' bathroom, girls' bathroom. And this relative had the firm belief that they're making kids gay at an early age. And I said, listen, I see both sides of the spectrum, but I do tend to agree more with you that they shouldn't do that at an early age. They shouldn't. Kids are too young for that. However, at an elementary school age, for the most part, you don't understand what certain things are. You think you have a grasp because of what you see and what you hear, so therefore you formulate your own opinion. 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, you don't know what the fuck anything is. And I was having another discussion with a teacher about this, where you have young kids saying, I'm gay, or they think that they're gay. But they think this because they see two people of the same sex showing affection. It may not be kissing, it may not be anything sexual. They just see two people who happen to be the same gender showing affection towards one another. So a young child perceives that as, I'm gay because I love my best friend, and I don't ever want my best friend to go away. So I want to marry my best friend. And when she told me this, I said to myself, that's an interesting perspective, because again, at an elementary school level, kids don't know the details of marriage. They don't understand the details of sexuality. They're not supposed to. They're 6, they're 7, they're 8. They don't grasp it the way we do as adults. So when we see this shit on public bathrooms and we see it at school bathrooms and things of the nature, our brains immediately go to worst case scenarios because we have a better understanding than a kid, generally speaking. Even though there's a lot of adults who act like fucking children. But we understand there's a backstory to this. There's a meanings to this. We have the experiences also to back that up. So, as I'm talking to my relative now, I'm chatting with my relative, and I'm explaining to her, look, if you do this now, kids aren't going to understand, and they don't know until they get home, and it's explained to them what this means. And based on that explanation is how they're going to be pointed and trajected into that direction. And she kept with the belief that this is making kids gay. And I said, listen, you can't make someone gay. I don't know why this is a belief that people have. Listen, no one has made me heterosexual. I am heterosexual. That's my preference. That's who I am. So, plenty of friends that I have, they didn't choose their preferences. Most of them had a preference because of who they truly are was deemed to them to be a sin, or was deemed to be embarrassing, or is deemed to them to be wrong, or deemed hatred, vile towards them. So they never were able to express who they were because they were too busy living in this bubble or this shell of who society says they should be. And I have one young lady who on Facebook put a post how she knew that she was different at a young age. But because the way the world is painted, she told herself that this was wrong. She told herself this is bad. She told herself there's something wrong with her and this is not how she should feel. But once she, quote unquote, came out of the closet, it was almost like jubilation for her. She felt comfortable in her own skin because now she's being true to who she is versus what a world full of judgmental hypocrites are telling her she should be. And I had a really close friend. We were 23, 24. She asked me a question. Do you think I chose to be in a lifestyle where I'm constantly being harassed, threatened, and embarrassed, and ridiculed, and criticized? Do you think somebody wakes up one day and says, you know what? I want a lifestyle that's going to give me all this pain. Bring that on. No, it's the opposite. Society tells you shouldn't be this, and they paint this picture of it being so evil that if anyone even remotely attempts to show this is who they are, they get crucified, figuratively, obviously. Actually, not even figuratively anymore, because you got it now where it's hate crime. So it's interesting how my relative saw it, and I told her, I said, listen, and she said, we should wait till high school to do something like this. I said, you run the risk at high school of a bunch of kids whose hormones are raging, who think they got the world figured out because the world that they've been living in for the past 10 years, everything's been structured this way. They're going for popularity and what's cool. So you have the face of peer pressure. And now you're going to make them, expose them, put them in a situation where they think, feel, and believe this is the time I'm supposed to discover. They know probably just as much as a kid does, especially if it's not exposed to them. Or at that age, man, listen, as a young boy, you start growing hair, you get embarrassed. Ladies, you start developing, you get embarrassed. So now you want to talk about a preference? You think that's going to be more open? is interesting. When do you think, if at all, an age appropriate for someone to discuss sexuality? Because if you don't want to see two men or two women kissing on film or on TV, what's the difference between a man and a woman doing it? Sexualization is sexualization. You're forcing gay kids to be ashamed of their sexuality because it's not the same as heterosexuality. So how is that any better? Can anyone explain that to me? I think that's not hypocritical, but it damn sure isn't equal, if that makes any sense. So when you see people having consensual coitus, is that appropriate? Or is it only appropriate because we agree this is how it should be? This is how it should be. Which one is that? Because it's almost hypocritical, right? And I understand where my relative was coming from. I do. And I also understand that my relative comes from a time where a lot of that shit was taboo. You didn't talk about it. You didn't discuss it. You didn't bring it up. And understand something too. When you grew up in a time, when you grew up in an era, and certain things were certain things, it's extremely hard for some people to break that stigma, to break that consistently, to that mindset, because it's been ingrained, it's been emboldened, it's something that's in their DNA, to where to think anything outside of what it is wrong. I personally think and believe when you get into a conversation with somebody regarding something such as sexual preference or religious belief, the issue in today's world, everybody is wrong except for me. And you have large groups of people who believe that's how to communicate. So because I'm right and you're wrong, anything you say that doesn't match what I think, I'm going to discredit that. My theory is to sit down, have a conversation, and get you to explain to me what it is that creates this perspective for you. What is it that causes you to believe the opposite of what I believe? Because believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, you don't always have the right answers. And I think it's also interesting how people collectively, people would unanimously agree that the media is full of shit. The news stirs the pot. They're the one who shakes the hornet's nest. But at the same time, this information that they get is from, ready for this? The news. Figure that out. Majority of the information that you get happens to be from the same exact source that you say you don't trust. And motherfucker, they figured that out yet. You either get it from a source that you say you don't trust, or you get it from a comment section of an article that nobody read. Think about that. And then when someone who's informed gets into the conversation, these people are ignored. Now, the flip side of that coin is they may not be ignored. People may read their comment and realize what the article really truly said, or what the topic is really truly about. And now that you inform them about it, they have a different perspective. But I just noticed that those who read articles, those who actually do legitimate research, I'm not talking about blogs or biased opinion pieces, but actually do research and talk to people who are involved in certain things. Very few of those folks ever get engaged in a conversation with anyone outside of their circle. It's interesting. It's very interesting. What say you guys, again, about the normalization of sexualization? Should it be a certain age? Should it be a certain stage in life? Should it just be removed completely? Whether it's homosexual, heterosexual, doesn't really matter. What say you? Reach us at the E.I.T.H.R podcast, E.I.T.H.R, on Instagram or on Twitter. You can download the Spreaker app, Spreaker. Chat with us while we're live. GNS Inc., the GNS Inc. on YouTube. Subscribe. See the rest of the 65 episodes. We'll talk to you guys next time. Be good.
Yo. Sit yo stankin' ass down and tune into the E.I.T.H.R podcast. My daddy D. Cal is talking. Bitch.